right now, setting high standards and holding ourselves accountable. So very interested in hearing what's next.
Good. Thank you, Karen, and certainly thank you all today for joining us. This is truly one of those transformational moments in our time, and certainly the impact that you've heard today in terms of the excitement that we have here in Northern Kentucky is really the result of all the work that's going on, and certainly the organizations that you lead, and certainly the work that we're all doing. We set high standards in all aspects of the community work and vibrancy that we do. The pursuit of these world-class standards for all elements of community life is an ongoing commitment that we all share and certainly all have a responsibility for. This includes education, health, housing, workforce, talent development, capital strategy, business growth, transportation and mobility, advocacy. Where working groups and organizations have a place in for years. The difference today is that we are now working towards a united strategy, and we're moving forward as one. The importance for accountability to this community is related to the outcomes of our growth organizations and highlighting the progress from organizations moving forward with impact and intent. As part of this session, we've highlighted the needs for accountability to the community that we work and serve, and the need for a community scorecard to track our progress. The panel will discuss two components, why it matters and what gets measured. It is my pleasure to introduce Janet, Travis, and Lee, who will share a little bit about their backgrounds and the work that they're doing and the development of this community scorecard. Janet, you're going to kick off the conversation today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So 1NKY has 3 goals. We are one, we are a community of choice, and we hold ourselves accountable. I'm going to talk about that we hold ourselves accountable. We had last year at our strategy session we put together what we called our SMART goals. And SMART goals are just a way of framing how do you measure your progress towards goals. The S is for specific. So for example, clear goals prevent confusion. So we're not trying to improve housing, we're trying to increase the number of housing units by 10%. Measurable. What gets measured is what gets done. If you can't measure it, it's probably not going to get done. Is it achievable? We want to stretch ourselves. We don't want to make all of our goals easy, but if we make them too far out there, we'll never achieve them either. So we want them to be, we have the available time and the available resources to actually achieve them. Are they relevant? Not every goal will tie to the broader plan. So economy, talent, and quality of life, if it doesn't move the region forward, it's probably not a priority. Is it time bound? We need to set deadlines for ourselves. If you don't have deadlines and timelines, you'll never drive that accountability. And I think from an application standpoint, if we have consistent measurements of progress across projects, it shows that what needs to be adjusted over time. And then the SMART framework also gives us a shared language for planning and accountability. As 1NKY moves into that unified strategy plan, continuing to use this approach keeps us focused, realistic, and transparent.
Is this on? Yeah. Thank you, Janet. Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Geisigam with the Catalytic Fund. We are a mission-driven company offering real estate investments and services to revitalize Northern Kentucky communities and drive economic development. We've been doing this for the past 13 years to the tune of over 100 projects, $40 million of private investment, and $450 million of total real estate development impact. I think, /hope, we're all aware of the housing challenges in our community now, thanks to the work of Tara and the AD, facilitating the housing study and subsequent strategies. We need at least 6,650 units over the next 5 years to keep pace with our economic development demand. And why is this important? Other than the obvious, people deserve affordable places to live, there is a dollars and cents argument. We have something like 2.5 open workforce jobs for every available unit in Northern Kentucky. And the work that Lee and BNKY have done to help facilitate this economic development engine that's creating jobs has been fantastic. but we do not have the housing stock to match that. So when we have a problem in our own lives, should we just sit and wallow and feel sorry for ourselves, or should we look for a solution? As much as I like a little self-pity, I think we can all agree being solution-oriented is very important. So the Catalytic Fund saw this problem with housing, and we developed a business plan for the Northern Kentucky Housing Fund, which we hope serves as a solution. The Housing Fund will make flexible, low-interest rate loans to developers producing new housing units, either through new construction or infill projects. The terms and rates of these loans will be tailored to each project's specific needs and will produce units of all types. It's important to note that this is not free money. These are secured loans that are revolving. We expect a payback, and that creates a sustainable fund that has a stronger return on investment. You can see on the slide behind me this little chart. So we have investor dollars going into the fund. That fund then makes loans to developers who are creating projects that create housing units. We get repayments on those loans, and then it recycles through back through the system. And it's really, hopefully, that simple. And I want to stress that this is a lot more than just a business plan for a housing fund. This is continuation of work that we are already doing at the Catalytic Fund. I like to think we have the qualifications, the staff, the infrastructure, and the track record to execute this type of fund. We are currently in the process of fundraising, trying to capitalize the fund. So we are looking for CRA-motivated bank loans, philanthropic grants, corporate dollars, and government support. I'm happy to say that we already have 2 commitments to our housing fund, one of which is Fifth Third Bank. The fund launches once we have $5 million of investment capital, but our end goal is $25 million. At $25 million, it becomes that sustaining fund and can produce 1,000 housing units within the first 5 years. So to close, we hope this housing fund builds that foundation of accountability for our regional challenges, and hopefully builds the foundation for thousands of new housing units throughout Northern Kentucky.
Thank you, Travis. We'll turn it over to Lee.
Was just taking a quick look at what I was supposed to talk about here.
I knew that's what you were doing.
I get off script sometimes at these, Karen, and I want to make sure that I'm not even close to script today. I'm sitting here listening to these things, and I don't know what life was like before. It was probably hard. There were probably challenges. When they moved the airport over here in 1946, probably wasn't easy. When they decided to build the interstate highways here, probably wasn't easy. We talk about things today, probably not easy, otherwise we'd be doing it. I'm always reminded when I come to these, we're a prosperous community today, and I don't want to be the generation that doesn't rise to the challenge that our forefathers and foremothers did when they got the airport and they got the highways and they came over the Appalachian Mountains, or they came across whatever ocean that they came across to get here. They rose to the challenge so that we could enjoy the prosperity we have today, and I wonder what we're going to hand off to them. And I say all that because there's so much talk today about not doing something, or let's just freeze the community in amber and it'll be perfect going forward. And I'm going to bet that's not a successful strategy. And so we're doing a little book club at BNKY, and we're reading the book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Anybody ever read that? I'm not that effective, so I've only read 6 of them. So I'm just going to give you my part of it. And I think about, begin with the end in mind. People like you who care about this community need to think about where you want to be when we hand the torch off to the people that Bob's training. What do you want it to look like? So we're talking about, ultimately I'm going to talk about metrics and measurement. In our world at BNKY, we put first things first. We know what our metrics are. We measure every single year for the last 37 years, jobs, CapEx, wages. We understand how our role is to play to contribute to the top line of the economy by bringing new companies here, working with partners to do that, grow the ones that are, we understand that. We're measuring that. We'll report on that. We understand part of our role is to give you good quality information. You can get that today through the Northern Kentucky Atlas. If you want to know about demographics, infrastructure, quality of life, education, health, housing, and so much more, it's all there for you. The question then is really, what do you want to measure? What do you want this place to look like in 10 or 15 or 20 years? And that's where habit, my favorite habit, we need to seek first to understand. What does this community want to look like? And I mean every person from the ones that live by the river to the ones that live in the South County. How do we want to leave it better? Because every one of them have chosen to live here because it's a prosperous community. They didn't choose to live here because it's not a prosperous community. And so you think about the metrics that we as a community need to figure out how to measure going forward, just some things that I think about that are important. Population. Travis talks about housing, population. Population growth is slowing, but it's not going to zero. So how are we going to grow as a community? What is that going to look like? Where are they going to live? What kind of jobs are they going to have? The infrastructure, you've heard this over and over and over. We're overfunded on infrastructure already. Amenities are a critical piece of it. I'll tell you one quick aside, and then I'll pass on. I met with a young guy who was at the Newport Dog Park. Where's Jeff Bessaker? Having a great time. He said, I'm from Philadelphia. He works in the professional world. His wife is at UC studying medicine, going to become a doctor. They're the kind of people, among the kinds of people we want to recruit to our community. He said, we love it here. Man, you have no good public spaces. He's like, it's not very green, and there's not many parks we can meet at. And this isn't me saying this, and of course, I'm defending the community. Have you been to Davoo? Have you been to this? But these are the kinds of things these folks are talking about. So I'm going to wrap this up and give Karen her thing back. So for BNKY, we understand what our role is. We're measuring it. If you want to know what's on our website, we're working closely, as Janet said, with our partners to make sure we're not duplicating in other people's lanes. I think as a community, we really need to figure out what you want to measure going forward, and then all of us are here to get that done for you.
Well, thank you, panel. And this is our third panel, and I think this is a great example of where we set a structure, and using the housing situation as an example, there was a study that was completed because there was a need that rose up within the community. That study was socialized through many stakeholders, and now we're to the solution side of things. That's what we're hoping to get out of today, your input on some of these issues. So with that, it's time for our last table talk, and we'll do a few call outs and then it's social time. So keep up the rhythm. You're doing great. Thank you all. Okay, sounds like the noise is dimming a little bit. Let's do kind of a round robin, if you will. Ryan, any takers out there to share your outcomes, your takeaways? One here.
Yeah, so we talked about really there's 1,010,000 things that we here in Northern Kentucky could discuss and address. But what if in the next 10 years we really narrowed those down to 3 things? What 3 things do we really want to fix in the next 10 years? And that would be housing, health, and education. And we looked at that from what data do we already have and what data is available. We have a wonderful housing study. We have all of these educational readiness scores. We have a lot of health data. So now what can we actually do within the next 10 years to fix those things and address those things? Talking about senior housing, community vibrancy, what is our outdoor recreation like? What is our community health plan? What does that look like? And then really, what are we doing to address the general educational needs of students and their long-term plan? So narrowed it down to 3.
Great, thank you.
So our group talked about how we can promote our assets and internally how we can grow those assets by talking about the data points that they drive, the growth that they can drive. Like if you have access to 375 miles of trails by the year 2030, what kind of growth would that cause for economic and population for our community? If you have, we're one of 13 cities with all the arts in the country. So how do we start to put the narrative together? How do we have an inventory of the assets on an outward basis? How do we promote what we have, but also develop it more? So, telling our story to other communities, kind of bragging a little bit, which is not, Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, Midwest thing to do, but also, telling our story and getting investment from the business community and our government community.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Over here.
Rick Uhlefeld. Okay. Northern Kentucky's largest untapped resource is its high school students. We have in Northern Kentucky some extraordinary samples of what we could be doing for all of our students. Until we begin to measure the impact that those extraordinary programs are having, we're never going to have the will to make it available to all of our students in Northern Kentucky. So we have the innovation, we've got to take it to scale, but to do that, we've got to start to measure what is the impact, for example, of Ignite? Or what is the impact when Kenton County sets up an amazing relationship with NKU and it sends hundreds of kids over there every day so that they're graduating with an associate's, they're graduating from high school with an associate's degree. What happens after that? And until we know any of that stuff, we're going to kind of sort of say, oh, that's nice for those kids. It's time for us to say, we want it for all of our kids. And there's innovation out there, and some school districts could tell you some cool things that they're doing, but we aren't measuring, and so we're never going to bring it to all of our kids, and they all deserve it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa McDonald. I'm with World Affairs Council, and I've had the pleasure of having the table here with Meet NKY, as well as Sinsatucky Trails. And I really want to say that we appreciate NKY this opportunity and all of you sharing your ideas. And as someone who grew up in Covington and went to Holmes High School and went on to lead a global career in education, coming back to this room is truly an honor. And something that was brought up over and over at our table is, who are the voices that are not being heard in our community? We all have a privilege here. We are many privileged in this room, but how do we gather the measurements and the data from those that are at maybe what we would say the lower level of society? And just making sure that when we create hope for the future, we're asking for the voices of everybody to be heard, not just those of us in this room. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan Marshall from Adopt a Class. We had a very robust conversation talking about data specifically, and that so many of us in the room collect a lot of data. And if there was a way for us to share that data in some way across some platform to do more measurement, that would be a really bridge building for all of us in the room together. So that was our first thing. And then we also talked about the beautiful, polite candor of our region and how we're very polite to each other, but maybe we need to have some really honest conversations with each other in holding each other accountable and not looking at accountability as a stringent measure, but really as when goals are set very clearly, accountability comes naturally.
Thank you. Bob?
So our table discussed a number of things. One of them was the question was asked, what are the metrics? And there's a belief here that the story of economic development is not just CapEx. It's not just salary, average salary, and it's not number of jobs, but it's, if you look at GDP per capita, that will be a measure of how innovative we are as a community and how innovative we are, how we're driving innovation in our community. The fact is we can increase our GDP per capita and deliver a lot of value to our citizens without having to grow our population exponentially. I don't think any of us want to be Austin, Texas, right? But we certainly want to grow our population, be more inclusive, et cetera. And driving our growth, economic growth through innovation is what we believe is needed. Probably the most profound thing we talked about here was, I guess I'll ask this room, is anybody here because this is the best thing for your business? We're all here. In some cases, it is. Vibrant communities is good for our business, but we're not selfish in that regard. I don't think there's anybody in this room who's selfish, so selfish as to think that the only reason they're here is because it benefits their business. We're here because we care. And so what is our moral imperative as a community, right? Let's let's talk about that. What is our moral imperative? And we threw out a couple of ideas here. The Life Learning Center, they have their moral imperative is to help people to rise to their highest potential. Fernando Figueroa and I have talked about this many, many times, and our moral imperative would be create the opportunity for every Northern Kentuckian to have the socioeconomic mobility that they desire. And so I would just challenge this group, and we talked about it at this table, let's challenge this group to come up with what is our moral imperative, and let's use it as our moral compass, our North Star.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else?